Welcome back. It's exactly 12 o'clock, and we're now going to be talking with Dr. Ken Resnick. He is an education psychologist and the founder of Smart Choice Parenting Program. And of course, we're now going to be talking about what some people view as that dreaded time of the year, and as some would be looking forward to the most exciting time in their schooling career. And I'm not quite sure how parents view this time of year, very especially those who have children who will be sitting their matric exams. Probably a mixture of both. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about, preparation for the matric exams. A very good afternoon to you, Dr. Ken Resnick. Nice to have you on the show once again.
Good afternoon. And as I said, thanks for inviting me.
Always a pleasure. Okay, so Dr. Resnick, many matriculants are facing probably this period with dread, some with huge excitement, but undoubtedly overwhelmed, feelings of, feeling overwhelmed right now. What is the first thing they should do to calm the chaos and regain focus, not only in matriculants themselves, but moms and dads as well?
Yeah, look, moms and dads should definitely know how to stay calm because often the anxiety just filters through to the kids. At the end of the day, look, the matric exams are starting within a day or two, or they've just started. So it's a little bit
Mhm.
late. But what really needs, what I think is being ignored at schools from my experience, is actually teaching kids how to study. When I look at the notes, the way they set out, sometimes a lot of them are very confusing. They're not numbered correctly, and kids are not being shown how to study efficiently. Now, in order to study efficiently, you've got to be able to read. And that's another issue because if as you get to matric, there's much more work. You should be able to be reading very quickly so that you don't have to read every word and you can grasp what you're studying. So there are a lot of mistakes that kids make, and it doesn't seem to me that there's that much focus on school in terms of giving children the correct sort of study tips they need, like organizing a timetable. Today, a lot of kids are very disorganized. They don't plan well. They leave things to the last minute. They don't, there's a jumble with the way they study. And in the meantime, what I'm hoping to do maybe in this program is let's look at some of the facts in terms of how your mind works. For instance, that you can only effectively concentrate for about 40 minutes, and then you need to have a break. To study like for 2 hours and a shot, your mind's going to be very tired. And also you should be having a timetable organized so that you do have breaks, that you don't overwhelm yourself, and you should be prepared a little bit, as the year goes by, a little bit better. So we need to firstly understand how to set out a study timetable. And it doesn't mean you've got to study 8 hours in a row. Not at all. It's how we combine the subjects. Like, for instance, kids will often mainly study the subjects they enjoy, and the ones they don't enjoy, they sort of set aside or leave them to the last minute, get themselves in a state. So it's got to do with confidence, a lot of it. It's got to do with motivation. In other words, do the kids really want to study? If, for instance, a lot of them are hooked onto these PlayStation games, etc., sure, they can't wait to go and play their games, and they're not organizing their studies well. So there's a lot of anxiety around matric. There's no question about it. But at the end of the day, there are a few things if kids, certainly if parents understood. Assess your child's reading speed, for instance. There's so much, a child in matric should be reading at about 250 words a minute at 80% comprehension. And then you don't start like at A, the beginning of a topic and grind your way through. You've got to know how to take out that whole section, how the headings connect. There's a whole method of doing it that can save a child a lot of time. So, and then of course with the iPads, it's very difficult to study from an iPad because to highlight on an iPad is not that easy. But I don't think the kids are actually being given enough tools to actually enjoy studying. A lot of them might, but at the end of the day, they might see it as a big monster. So what parents should be doing is asking the kid, do they want help? In other words, parents need to learn what is important in terms of a child studying in Matric without the parent having to say to them, go and study. I haven't seen you study now, you go to your room. And the kid will sit there for 2 hours. It doesn't mean that they study. So the parents themselves might be worthwhile understanding study tips that are going to help their kid, providing their child is prepared to listen and take their advice. But there's no question a huge amount of anxiety is generated. But the breaks between subjects, there's plenty of time if kids study efficiently. And unfortunately, a lot of them cram. They leave it to the last minute, pump about 3 hours worth on geography, another 3 hours on history. And at the end of the day, it's not working well because they're not understanding how their mind works and how easy they forget. So we need to just help them understand. 1 hour bites. That's what I say to kids. 40-minute study, have a 10-minute break, and then 10-minute revision of what you've done. And then the way your mind works, you only have to revise again that specific portion the next day. Once you revise, you can wait a week. So you just need to understand that. A subject like maths, they should be practicing every day. Maths practice makes perfect. So the more you practice it, the more you're going over old papers and that, the more it's going to build up your confidence. Because a subject like maths, part of the problem, for instance, if they get a very difficult problem, as question number 1, often the kids go into a bit of a panic. So for instance, with maths, I normally say to the kids, go through the questions because there is plenty of time. See which ones you know you can answer. You can do those first. You don't have to start at number 1. You can, as long as you've got it numbered correctly, let's start with some that actually or a problem you'll be able to solve. So that the more difficult ones, you go to more towards the end of the exam. Because if you get stuck with question number 1 and then start generating a lot of anxiety, the next minute time starts becoming a problem. Am I going to finish the exam? And of course, a lot of panic sets in. So things like that, those little tips really help. And practice every day. You can't just practice 5 little problems or something you don't really understand. But there's no question that, as I said, a subject like maths, the more you practice, eventually you get better at it. It makes more sense.
Okay, so Dr. Resnick, what are the tips or how would you advise matriculants or anyone that is studying to move from a state of fearfulness and panic to a focused approach? Tell us about that tactic. How do we move from that one extreme to the other?
All right. So number 1, a lot of kids just want to study the subjects they like. They've got to do the subjects they don't like. So in other words, and you also set out a timetable, like for instance, 2 or 3 hours, let's say a day, is actually quite a lot of time divided into those blocks I told you. Start with the subject you don't like when you're fresh, so that at least you get that behind you, and the subjects that you do prefer, rather end of that session. Work out your timetable. For instance, let's say I'm going to do 3 hours a day. So then let's say from 2 o'clock till 3 o'clock, breaking it up into that 40 minutes, 10 rest and 10 revision. Have yourself a little half-hour break, then do a different subject for the next hour. And then maybe do a half-hour of maths the third hour. So break it up. Don't just keep doing the same subject like today. I'm going to do geography. So that you are putting a fair amount of time even into the subjects that you don't enjoy. But at the end of the day, your technique, and depending on what the subject is, of what are you going to absorb? How are you going to connect? Do you enjoy the subject? Do you understand what they're talking about? They need to make sure they comprehend properly, because otherwise, once again, we're just sort of spotting and that sort of thing. So being organized, I think, kids go for, and certainly with parents' help, go for a bit of help to organize that study timetable so that when you can actually start during the year and summarize your notes. I haven't got the time to go right into that. But certainly if you start even an hour a day, let's say 2 months before the exam, they write prelims as well. And then you can maybe increase it to 2 hours every afternoon. And it can stay 2 hours. You can give yourself a rest on a Friday, for instance, and then break up your weekend nearer the exams. So the maximum you do is maybe 5 hours broken up into hour blocks with at least a half-hour break in between. And at lunchtime, you can even give yourself a 2-hour break. So the whole idea, and then you've got to relax. You don't go and play your PlayStation in between. Just try and chill out and then realize I've got to do it. By trying to avoid it is a problem.
All right. So what you're actually stressing there, Dr. Resnick, is time management. So we need to teach our kids time management because that's the key to everything. But just to go back to my previous question, if a matriculant, if anyone for that matter, sitting an exam and they go into panic mode or freeze mode, how can they shift? What is the tactic that they should use to unfreeze, unpanic, and go into a state of focusedness, of deep focus, so that they can start being productive regarding the exam?
It's not that easy to just get rid of anxiety, because that has started quite long before they wrote their matric. In other words, you'll get kids that are very anxious, or kids that really need to do well, get themselves in a state, maybe even need some type of medication. So ideally, preparation and not overdoing it or cramming it for the last minute. So as I said earlier, even if you start a couple of months before, only do one subject per day as a start. Summarize that subject so that you're learning from your summarized notes rather than grinding through. Because one of the key things to effective studying, and I'm talking about when you have to study a subject, let's say like history, where there's a lot of notes, by being able to read quickly, you can highlight keywords. The idea of keywords is that when you study, you only have to read, if you've understood your little paragraph, you only need to read the keywords, and that'll give you a picture of what that paragraph is about. So being able to read quickly makes a big difference if you've got a large volume of work. The other thing is that if you have a section, let's say in history, World War I or World War II, have a look at the causes of the war. You'll find a whole lot of subheadings. So instead of grinding through the notes, take out the subheadings. So you get a picture by just looking at the subheading, what that particular section is about and how it connects. So things normally connect rather than see each little subheading as, separate from the whole picture. So the whole idea is to make it easier for yourself rather than grinding through the notes. Look, every particular section, whether geography or biology, is focused on a specific subject or whatever they've got to study. So but you need a bit of help. You know what I'm trying to say? It doesn't just come easy, and that's what I'm trying to say. And I don't think there's enough assistance often given to kids that way. But once again, if the parents are going to get uptight with the child, that doesn't help.
Okay.
It really doesn't help, especially by the time you get to matric.
All right, let's go for an ad break. We'll come back and continue this discussion. I think we'll have another 10 minutes or so with Dr. Ken Resnick. So do listen closely so that you can pick up some valuable tips regarding whichever exam you're sitting for, particularly the matric exam.
Penny Appeal's Education First campaign helps children to get access to quality education.
I'm 14 years old. When I grow up, I'd like to be a scientist.
We believe every child belongs at school,
And we want education, a better education.
learning and dreaming their way to a better future. With your help, we can provide classrooms, desks, stationery packs, and school shoes. Help make these dreams a reality. Visit www.pennyappeal.org.za or call 031 1100 573. Penny Appeal. Small change, big difference.
Shimmer, sparkle, captivate. Nothing less than a masterpiece. Droplets of gold inspires precious design. Platinum bursts with intricate freshness, and every pure diamond becomes more than just a girl's best friend. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, where timeless dreams become a reality. Come to us. We tailor-make designer gold, platinum, and diamond jewelry. Trade in or remodel your old gold. Clad yourself with classy name-branded watches. We offer insurance valuation and freezer card calculation. Visit us at 534 Ridge Road, Overport, or call 031 208 9142. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, manufacturers of fine gold and diamond jewelry.
You South African, of course. You anxious about the future. We've got you covered. Build on your wealth portfolio with Randry Jewelers Gold Coin Exchange. Visit us at 151 Stephen Dlamini Road, Musgrave, Durban, or call us on 031 202 4700 for more information. Randry Jewelers Gold Coin Exchange, your passport to gold investment.
Dad, these Frymax chips are so tasty.
Wow, that really takes me back. My dad bought me a Frymax chips every day after school. They were my favorite when I was your age as well. Quality is at the very heart of what we do, and that's why we ensure that every Frymax packet is filled with the beautiful goodness and flavor-packed taste that you've come to expect from us since 1982. Frymax, from generation to generation.
Listen to something fresh. Listen to Salam Media, your humanitarian broadcaster.
It is 17 minutes after 12 o'clock. We're talking exam preparation. And our guest is Dr. Ken Resnick. He's an educational psychologist and founder of Smart Choice Parenting Program. And I understand the Matric exams have just started, so I believe it's never too late for us to try and give them support and give a bit of practical and supportive advice by way of our programming. Welcome back, Dr. Resnick. And we were talking about fear, students who haven't perhaps studied enough, haven't managed their time properly, haven't spoken about and haven't put in place the preparation that you're talking about. So clearly there'll be a state of panic and we need them to focus. And even those learners that have in fact managed their time very well, I think this time of year is just really high anxiety time. So I should imagine a diet, a nutritious diet is very, very important during this time. And you alluded just now to meds. There again, it would be probably, I should imagine, homeopathy type of medication. We don't want them to start taking medication that might upset them even more or kind of throw them off. And we don't want them to be in a habit of the moment they feel a bit stressed, they need to run to the medicine chest. Your thoughts?
No, I agree fully. They need to find some way of relaxing. So ideally, if they're prepared, they've got to feel more confident the way they've prepared. In other words, they're going to know exactly what they're going to do per day. As I said, set out 4 subjects, 4-hour little blocks, give yourself lots of time for a break. When you have that break, go and lie down, listen to some music, whatever's going to relax, do a bit of yoga, whatever you want to do that might relax you, that's great. If maybe listening to whatever the music might be, certainly I think classical music sometimes works with that sort of thing. But just try and chill out. Don't go and get, as I said, revved up on sitting on your WhatsApp for the next half hour, whatever the case might be, getting all revved up. So they need to learn to have those breaks and relax so that and then they take the next subject out, which is going to be a different subject. So they've got to also be aware that they're going to have to study some subjects they don't enjoy. Put them on your timetable. Plan your timetable for the week. So if, for instance, 4 hours, let's say a day in little 1-hour bites, give yourself a break on a Friday if you want to. I'm just using that as an example. And don't overdo it on the Sunday, but make sure that you've allocated enough time for all your subjects. And once you can study efficiently, as I said, you just need a bit of help in knowing how to reduce your studying time by being able to summarize each section that you might have to do and put it in whatever. It's all about that. And once you can get yourself more confident and you've realized you've covered quite a lot of work, that makes a difference. Often kids that are maybe a bit obsessive will stick too long on a specific section. Before they know it, they've sat 2 hours, they get into a panic because they've left something else out. Get organized. Even if you yourself are disorganized, try and get somebody that will help you organize a study timetable so that you know, and you'll be surprised that if you allocate an X amount of time so that you're going to cover all the subjects, it makes it a lot easier than all of a sudden you've got this mountain because you've left one subject behind. Also, as you finish an exam or a subject, you're going to have a lot more time to allocate to the subjects that are still coming ahead of you, which means that you can have a lot more breaks as well, rather than try this cramming techniques. Some kids say they like waking up early in the morning. That's when they study best. Some try and make out the middle of the night. But remember, your brain can only take so much. So the key is find something that's going to relax you, whatever it might be. But I would definitely avoid social media if that's going to sort of hype them up when they're spending all their free time just talking to their friends. Give them, they can give themselves time for that.
Okay, so Dr. Resnick, what about those kids that overdo it? They're so focused on their studies and they push themselves way too hard. Is there probably the risk of them then perhaps panicking in the exam room or freezing up? They've pushed themselves so very hard. That could go wrong. What is your advice to them and their parents? How can parents and teachers support them that they don't overdo it? I mean, initially we started talking about those kids that haven't managed their time, they haven't planned well. But what about those that overdo it? Because they could, I suppose, get to a point of burnout.
100%. And I'm pleased that you brought that up, because why do you get kids like it? Now, you'll find often they want to please their parents, and they know that pleasing their parents, 10 A's or whatever the case might be, would help. But parents also have to look in terms of if there's an expectation. Listen, if you don't get 80%, so what starts happening, the kids then believe for themselves that they get less than 80, they fail. There are a lot of kids, and they get themselves in a state. They get 75 instead of 80. But that has started already in childhood. By the time they get to matric, they do get themselves in that state. They feel a failure. They feel they could be letting themselves down. They put far too much pressure. And often parents can't understand that. But at the end of the day, if parents had to look at that, you'll find that there was an underlying expectation from when the kids were young. And that is why you'll often get kids doing 10 subjects for matric, getting 10 A's, and they do nothing with their lives. Because at the end of the day, they're doing it because they get acknowledged. And there are a lot of reasons. So what we've got to do is help parents become aware if their child does get in the state. We've got to try and understand, why do they put that pressure on them? And I use a good example. If you walk on a tightrope, there's very little room for error. So you're stressed all the time. Whereas if you're children, you walk on the floor, you're fine. So these kids put themselves on a tightrope where they're not allowing themselves any room for error. But there's a reason for it, and it normally starts back earlier on in their development, where they've always been an A student, they've always made parents proud. There's a whole lot of factors, but it develops into an obsessive compulsive sort of disorder. It can develop into that, or they're perfectionists, which underlying that, there's always a lot of anxiety. And that is why, but you can pick that up, I think, as a parent early on, if your kid is putting too much effort into that. Often, it's the only thing that gives them some type of credential, and you might find they've got social problems, but they're always coming first in class and they get a lot of recognition, but they still might have a problem socializing. So there are a lot of factors in that, but there's no question it's not that healthy, because it can develop into an obsessive type of compulsive
Okay,
anxiety.
let me just turn that whole issue around. Let me ask the question in a different way. We're talking pure academics here. So I want to understand what happens post-matric. What happens to this child? Let's assume he or she is a high achiever, or whichever student has written matric. They pass the matric and they go on to higher education. Is the situation going to be the same in tertiary, the type of pressure the kids are, feel when they're doing the matric, or is that a totally different ball game altogether? Question number one. And question number two, do we find similar practices on the sports field? Do children go through the same sort of anxieties to win at all costs, to come out first in their swimming galas, their running, whatever sport they're involved in? Talk to us regarding those issues.
All right. So now again, we have to bring the parenting factor into that, because often the parents want them to be doctors or lawyers, etc., and they've never been allowed to make a decision, but they know that they need to, they need to make their parents proud. So a parent, for instance, my kid's going to university, and you might find this kid might be incredibly talented, let's say jewelry design, something with their hands, and not that great an academic. And the parents don't want to know. They say, no, my kid's going to university. And that alone creates a lot of stress. I remember once giving some first-year students at varsity a talk, and I asked them how many of them were doing this. It was a BCom, because their parents wanted them to do it. 90% of them put up their hand. So parents, ideally a child, like I do a lot of career assessments, and I bring the parents into it because I help the parents understand that this is a choice these children must make. And you've got to get used to it. You don't want to live your life through your child. Be a top accountant, be a top doctor, because they might be tops in something else. So a child has to develop into their own independent adult that's self-motivated, works hard, and enjoys what they're going to do. And there's often that sort of thing. When I do a career assessment, often kids are not ready for varsity. So they follow a career that their parents have asked, and then they drop out. And then the parents get upset. So you can pick up quite early on, is the child, do they have the self-discipline to cope with the first year subject? And do they have the motivation to even want to do that subject? So ideally, parents should have a child, get some insight into what does your child want to do? Where are their talents? How confident are they? How decisive are they? Do they know what they want? If they don't know what they want, they might need time to grow up. You don't want them to just do whatever mom and dad say. So there's a whole lot of variables here. And exactly the same goes with sport. Now, if you read Tiger Woods, you've got to read Andre Agassi's book. Like his dad was making him hit 2,500 tennis balls over the net every day at the age of 6. He hated tennis. And he really knew how the damage it sort of did to him. But he was an incredible guy, very intense. So you've got that sort of thing. If the child on their own wants to achieve, that's one thing. But if there's an underlying parent driving them, then they don't like losing. And then they become bad sports. So, of course, those things are not great because you can't always be a winner. Just read Tiger Woods' background. You'll see how he was pushed, and you could see some of the consequences of that in terms of his personality. So that's where parents really play a very, a very strong role in how that child feels about themselves. And when the child isn't quite making it, the child doesn't feel good. And the parents feel
okay. Sorry for the interruption. I do need to get in one or two more important questions. Sure. You spoke about career guidance. Now, most schools do offer that as part of the year end, or, once you're coming towards year end, they talk to kids about career guidance. But we know that this happens from an early age in the home as well. And even despite the fact that the parents and the child or children over the years have discussed a possible career or profession for that child once they're done with matric, is it still important, in your opinion, for that family unit to go for career guidance counseling outside of the school environment to get a more objective assessment and guidance in which way the child should go? And also, should we at an early age give the child one or two options, or possibly three options, always play around with three different options rather than just pushing them in one direction, either medicine or accountancy or whatever it is that we didn't fulfill in our own lives, and we want our children to live out that dream. They need to go into that profession to live out our dreams.
Right. So then, now you brought it up. Like when I do an assessment, what are the things that you've got to look at with a child? Are they able to make decisions? Now, if parents have brought kids up where the kids are able to listen, the kids grow up very indecisive. Do they have the staying power to see through a task, or do they tend to give up? How well socialized are they? Because certain careers attract certain types of personalities, like an accountant. They've got to be very, look at all the finicky things, attention to detail, all of that sort of thing. So we've got to look, are they ready to make such a big decision? How well motivated are they? Because these days, with the kids just believing that they get a degree and they want to be managing directors in a couple of weeks, it doesn't happen. That perseverance, that kids don't persevere as much as they do. A lot of them lacking empathy. They're only about themselves. So we've got a lot of issues that are generally, I'm generalizing a lot, but there's no question. And then they don't want to work for things. They expect it to fall into their lap. And so we've got there's different trends with young people today that have changed as to what it was in our day. But to just send a child off to varsity and the kid sits there and now they've got to tell their parents they don't like what they're doing. Now they change to another course and that's not okay. So the idea of a career assessment, a good one, is to give parents the insight as to where the child's shortcomings are in terms of their self-motivation. Do they stick with things? Are they easily influenced? Are they assertive? How do they feel about themselves? Are they able to stay focused if it's a job that requires a lot of focus, direct focus? How well socialized? You're looking at them. Are they conformists, or do they tend to know how to fit in society? So you bring up a lot of factors that by throwing a kid all of a sudden into varsity, when there's those temptations, where the child has never had to discipline themselves, and now all of a sudden they're at varsity. Yeah, all of those are big distractions. The kids just let it all rip out. So there's so many factors, and parents, I believe, and when I always talk to the parents. I always give them a lot of insight about their kid, but I talk to the child first so that I can understand what does this child actually want. And if there are things that might be clashing with the parents, I call the parents in all the time and we discuss it. And then make the decisions in terms of what's in the child's best interest, what's going to help that child grow up to feel good about themselves, to be decisive, to know how to be assertive, not be influenced by people around them. There's a whole lot of factors that come out. So I believe parents really have to come into the picture, especially if they've planned their kids' life out. And these days especially, a lot of kids, a lot of dropouts. They're doing something they're not really enjoying. And a lot
Okay,
of it
Dr. Ken Resnick, that's where we're going to have to leave it. Thank you indeed. And let's just wish our matriculants all the very best for the matric exams 2025. Go well, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, and good luck to the matrics. Thank you.
It is exactly 12:34, and our final interview is lined up for us. I think we're taking an ad break, and right after we'll be joined by Dylan Mashele, Public Relations Communications Consultant at the National Council of and for Persons with Disabilities.